Some of you will recall 17 years ago when I made the prediction that nutrition would become the most important science in all of medicine. Today, we ride the crest of a tsunami of change in medical science, a paradigm shift in our understanding of disease prevention, one that will transform prevailing medical dogma and displace the misguided beliefs held by mainstream pharmaceutical medicine. As Dr. Albert Szent-Györgyi, Nobel laureate in medicine and physiology, stated, vitamins, if properly understood and applied, will help us reduce suffering to an extent which the most fantastic human mind would fail to imagine. There have been many breakthroughs in medicine over the years due to our turning to nutrition for answers to degenerative disease. But this morning, I want to talk to you about what I regard as one of the most important medical breakthroughs of our time. You've heard me speak many times about the need to get our bodies back into sync with our biology by eating closer to the earth, exercising, and embracing the sun as our wellspring for both physical and spiritual renewal. I cannot stress too much the importance of these simple truths. Have you ever watched an iguana or other reptiles seek out the warming rays of the sun? Besides using its heat to warm their cold-blooded bodies into daily activity, they become vitamin D photosynthesizing factories when bathing in solar radiation. In fact, all advanced terrestrial life forms depend on sunlight to manufacture vitamin D and have done so ever since emerging from the primordial seas. My cells are solar powered, and yours should be too. Just as it is for the iguana, the sun is as essential to your health as oxygen. So what is it that the iguana knows that we seem to have forgotten? Well, friends, welcome to the vitamin D story. Vitamin D has been around since the beginning of time, but the latest chapter of the vitamin D story begins during the Industrial Revolution, when people began to move into tightly cloistered cities with polluted air and little direct sunlight. Doctors reported a new disease afflicting young children that caused bowed legs, weakened bones, and other skeletal deformities, rickets. By the turn of the 20th century, around the time researchers discovered that sunlight stimulated the production of vitamin D, 80% of children living in Northern Europe and Northeast United States were afflicted with this bone-deforming disease. Soon we learned to treat rickets and many other diseases by exposing patients to sunlight on rooftop solaria. Heliotherapy quickly became the standard treatment for diseases such as rickets, tuberculosis, and psoriasis. It worked. We just didn't know why. The modern-day use of sunlight as a source of healing was soon pushed aside with the advent of antibiotics, vaccinations, and other wonder drugs that were promoted by the pharmaceutical industry in favor of natural cures. During the 1960s, after it was discovered that overexposure to sunlight could also contribute to skin cancer and premature wrinkling, a massive shift in public perception was created that sun was bad and must be avoided at all costs. Over the next 50 years, the campaign of cover up and slap on sunscreen with all their toxic ingredients would be largely responsible for a worldwide epidemic of vitamin D deficiency that has affected the health of millions and millions. Vitamin D is in a class by itself, a steroid hormone rather than a true vitamin. It is the only nutrient to be manufactured by the body in direct action to sunlight. It regulates cellular function by targeting over 2,000 genes in our bodies, about 6% of the human genome. Vitamin D is unique in that very little is obtained through a normal diet. The principal source of vitamin D is production in the skin upon exposure to the sun. In the presence of the skin-penetrating ultraviolet B rays, dehydrocholesterol, a precursor of cholesterol, is converted into cholecalciferol or pre-vitamin D. Yes, vitamin D is another one of those critical compounds that depend on cholesterol for synthesis. If you are taking a cholesterol-lowering statin drug, you are shorting yourself of the very substance that is essential for the formation of vitamin D, as well as all your sex hormones, all your adrenocortical hormones, and other substances that are absolutely essential for life. The skin's ability to manufacture vitamin D is extraordinary, provided you spend some time in strong sunlight and are at the right latitude. 15 to 30 minutes exposure when the sun is high in the sky, enough to cause a slight pinkening of the skin within 24 hours, is the equivalent of taking 15 to 20,000 international units of vitamin D in supplemental form. To get the equivalent amount of vitamin D from your food would require you to eat 30 cans of sardines, 100 to 200 glasses of milk. I don't advise it. 1 to 200 bowls of fortified cereal. I don't advise it. 500 to 1,000 egg yolks, or 4.5 pounds or 2 kilograms of wild salmon. What about the old fear of toxicity from too much vitamin D? It being fat soluble. We now know that it is not possible to overdose on vitamin D synthesized from the sun. This is because the body has inherent mechanisms to inactivate excess vitamin D. The amount of vitamin D you obtain from your diet is insignificant, and taking vitamin D in a supplement would require more than 10,000 international units every day for over 6 months before you might see any side effects. We now know that vitamin D functions at the cellular level when it enters the nucleus and regulates the expression of over 2,000 genes. This ability is unmatched by any other molecule, allowing it to improve fertility, safeguard pregnancy, reduce chronic inflammation, help weight control, protect against infectious agents, prevent strokes and dementia, bolster the immune response, boost mental cognition, help regulate heart function, and support muscle strength. All in all, not a bad day's work. For example, vitamin D receptors in the pancreas respond to activated vitamin D by stimulating insulin production. And activated vitamin D in the muscle tissue increases insulin sensitivity to ward off type 2 diabetes. Teens with poor vitamin D status are twice as likely as those with adequate levels of vitamin D to have high blood pressure and high blood sugar, and more than 4 times as likely to suffer pre-diabetic metabolic syndrome. Tragically, we know that 61% of young Americans are chronically deficient in vitamin D. Low levels of the hormone can also increase the overall risk of adverse cardio events, including sudden heart attack, heart failure, or stroke, by a whopping 60%. As well, the vitamin's benefits in stimulating cardiovascular function are now recognized as being as important as aerobic exercise. I stand before you today to state that vitamin D may, in fact, be our most underappreciated and misunderstood health secret. If there was a single nutrient that would help you ward off heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, dementia, influenza, depression, insomnia, muscle weakness, fibromyalgia, osteomalacia, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoporosis, psoriasis, multiple sclerosis, and hypertension, what would it be? You guessed it, vitamin D. Stop and consider the implications. A few minutes each day spent in bright sun, or taking an inexpensive vitamin D supplement. Childproof. It can harness nature's powers to significantly reduce our risk of dying from virtually all of the major killers today. Together, these chronic diseases contribute to nearly 90% of all non-accidental deaths in the United States. More than 2,500 studies now have been published confirming vitamin D's role in prevention of cancer. Together, the findings suggest that vitamin D may very well be the single most effective means of cancer prevention, even outpacing the benefit of a healthy diet. Exposure of cancerous prostate cells to vitamin D causes the cells to immediately convert the vitamin to its active form, thereby stopping the chaotic reproduction and growth of these aberrant cells. It appears to do so by inducing apoptosis, or cellular suicide, in precancerous tissues, and by inhibiting angiogenesis, the formation of new blood vessels needed to nourish cancerous growth. The fact that activated vitamin D can regulate cellular function and growth has overwhelming implications. It means that when you are exposed to strong sunlight or supplement with high levels of vitamin D, excess vitamin D can be stored in cellular tissues to be activated at any time in order to regulate aberrant cell growth that can lead to cancer, effectively snuffing out cancer before it takes hold. We now know that vitamin D from strong sunlight is responsible for preventing cancers of the breast, ovaries, colon, prostate, bladder, uterus, esophagus, rectum, and stomach. In fact, the further you live from the equator, the greater is your risk of dying from cancer, period. Some researchers now contend that low vitamin D status may be a predisposing factor in all cancers. For years, the evidence has mounted that sun exposure is an effective prevention and a treatment for immune disorders. Like cancer, the prevalence of these disorders correlates directly with latitude. The further you deviate from the equatorial zone, where sunlight is always strong, the higher is the incidence of these diseases. The importance of sunlight to the body's immune response is demonstrated each year when the waning sunlight of autumn precedes the flu season. We now know that macrophages, the principal germ-killing cells of our immune system, can independently activate vitamin D from their cellular stores. In the presence of activated vitamin D, macrophages switch on the genes, controlling the manufacture of cathelicidin, a protein that specifically targets and kills infectious agents. One recent study demonstrated an astounding 90% reduction in upper respiratory tract infections when supplementing with 2,000 international units of vitamin D compared to the currently prescribed RDA dose of 400 IUs per day. In fact, the evidence supporting vitamin D's efficacy in reducing viral-borne infections, such as seasonal influenza, is so strong. Many physicians, and I wholeheartedly agree, now recommend boosting daily intakes to 5,000 IU per day or more during the flu season, rather than to submit to the questionable effectiveness and risks of the flu shot. As I speak, representatives of the U.S. Food and Nutrition Board and Health Canada are meeting to review these same recent findings, and with the view to recommending a substantial increase in the RDA for vitamin D, which has not changed in over 50 years. In the latest issue, the very latest issue of Experimental Biology and Medicine, international experts throughout Europe and the United States have called for a global policy change on vitamin D, which they contend is crucial to reduce the risks of a host of degenerative diseases. Here at USANA Health Sciences, we didn't want to wait. We could see ahead of the curve, and we wanted everyone in the USANA family to benefit from increased protection from higher levels of that vitamin D provide. As you may or may not know, we have already substantially increased the daily intake for vitamin D in our essential formulation to maximum limits. And we have added a vitamin D booster to ensure you can achieve adequate blood levels at all times. I want to urge you to remember our friend, the iguana, and get out in the sun more often. Make sure that you get at least 15 to 30 minutes of exposure to bright sun before you put on any sunscreen. Remember, as soon as you put on SPF 15 sunblock, you eliminate over 90% of your body's capacity to make vitamin D. You need to supplement all year round and to booster during the winter months and beyond to ensure you maintain healthy levels of vitamin D. Lastly, make certain you get tested periodically to ensure you have adequate circulating vitamin D in your blood. Levels of 25-hydroxy vitamin D should be at least 40 to 60 nanograms per mil, as reported in U.S. laboratories, or 100 to 150 nanomoles per liter, as is reported in Canadian laboratories. My message to you is that vitamin D deficiency is the most unrecognized and misdiagnosed nutritional deficiency in the world. More than 1 billion people worldwide and 40% of the U.S. population between 19 and 40 years of age are chronically deficient in vitamin D. Its consequences have cost billions of healthcare dollars and millions of precious lives. May you love life and live it to its fullest in happiness and health.